So obviously these are not new arguments. Certainly
No.
These have been critiques since the law was passed.
Mm-hmm.
And this law has been challenged twice before and upheld by the California Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals.
Yep.
What makes you guys believe that you're going to have a better shot at getting it tossed out this time around?
Yeah, I believe the Firearms Policy Coalition now currently has a case challenging this same law, and that's awesome. I think that's Rena versus Becerra, Renna. And then I think it was, I can't remember the court case that failed and is just dead at this point. We see it as a potential to win in the new era of Bruin. Heller should have been enough, but the state and the Ninth Circuit was totally fine using the means end argument, saying, hey, basically, they want to get rid of these guns because they want it to be safer in California. They were basically able to justify any infringement because the goal, in their words, was to create a safer environment, essentially. With Bruin, now, I'm not sure anyone can argue that there is a text, history, and tradition of banning the quintessential defensive firearms that are used for lawful purposes. There is not much of a history banning the most common, normal firearms in America. And I think Bruin really opens that up. And I'm very hopeful. I've spoken with some of the lawyers, and they are trying their hardest to prepare for the counter arguments, however weak they are going to be. They have to prepare for those, but we see this as very, very high chances of being successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly Bruin changes the landscape quite a bit on this question of whether or not the law violates the Second Amendment. And it will likely come down to this historical analog test that was set up in Bruin. It is hard to imagine that there will be a historical analog to something like the unsafe handgun roster. And so, boy, I do think you guys have a better chance. However, there was, a recent ruling from a federal district court in California dealing with San Jose's gun insurance requirements, which found that law, even though it is literally the first of its kind, it just passed. Was it this year or was it 2021? Either
I think it was this year, just a couple months ago. Yeah,
I think you're right. It was earlier.
I think they've been talking about it for but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, COVID's still got me kind of. Time is
it's 2020.
Still a strange concept after the pandemic, but yeah, it's still 2020 basically. It's always going to be 2020.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's recently passed. There hasn't been any sort of you need to buy insurance, especially some sort of odd liability against criminal action insurance that they've created in San Jose. There's a lot of problems with this law, but the federal judge who's just reviewed it. The first rung of the federal court system has determined that there is a historical analog, and it's surety laws that dealt with someone putting up basically a surety against carrying their guns in public if they had been accused of being a threat to society. So they had to put up a surety if they were wanted to carry in case they caused some sort of harm. And so I think that's the kind of historical analysis that you're going to see from judges who want to uphold these kinds of laws. How do you guys plan to deal with it? I mean, obviously you're not the lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer.
You're just one of the plaintiffs, but I'm interested in your point of view on, how you counter those sorts of arguments.
Yeah, I believe that was the court case brought up by NAGR that was seeking a preliminary injunction against it, and that was denied. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out, especially since, as far as I'm aware, the specifics of how they're going to enforce that and the specifics of what they want from those ordinances, I'm not sure that's all been finalized as of yet. So it's particularly interesting that they were able to get things through that quickly. So I'm very much following that case. I think that's very interesting. San Jose is a population of, I think, like or Santa Clara County it's a pretty big population in the state of California. I think it's like 4 or 5 million people. So it affects a lot of people, and it could set precedents. Like we were talking earlier, things start in California and seem to migrate out. I know that the lawyers that are working on this case are very aware of that, and I'm sure that they have a plan. I'm not too sure of it. And if I was, I would be somewhat hesitant to reveal those plans.
That's fair.
Because I'm sure they got their strategies and practices of how to fight it that they may not want shared until it's time to share that. So I don't have a specific answer on that. However, they seem very confident in their ability to win this case.
Just to summarize real quick, then, obviously the counter argument to your case is going to be that there were, if you look at it from a certain perspective, if you zoom out far enough, there were laws against, that sought to restrict dangerous and unusual weapons. This is something the Supreme Court has talked about as one of the traditions that exist. And I'm sure that's what a lot of this case is, the historical analysis is going to focus on. Do you find that the historical tradition of restricting dangerous and unusual weapons is a good fit with this unsafe handgun law, or what's your view on how this plays with traditional regulation of guns in America?
Yeah, they're certainly going to try to say that the goal of it is to restrict certain types of firearms that are unusual or dangerous. But the guns that they are restricting seem to be no longer the era of Saturday night specials where they were trying to keep guns that would explode or be particularly dangerous to use for the user and not be drop safed. But that's no longer the types of firearms that are being restricted by this. They are essentially restricting the most common handguns in America, flat out, just across the board. And I'm not sure that there has been a law banning the most common firearms used for lawful purposes that would hold and has been upheld.
Right. So the common use for lawful purposes, which was something that they talked about at length in Heller, of course, and repeated in Bruin. That's where you see this law being unconstitutional.
I mean, I think we would both say that all gun laws are unconstitutional, but when we are talking about arguing stuff in the courts, the arguments have to be a little bit more advanced than screaming the text of the Second Amendment. But I think that it's kind of hard to say that the most common handguns in America are dangerous and unusual. And I think that was part of what was argued in Heller, is that the handgun is the quintessential defensive weapon used for lawful purposes. And specifically with this, they are banning the quintessential defensive firearms that are very commonly used across every other state, barring a few that have similar laws that aren't as extreme.